Well, we will go ahead and get started. Hi, everyone. My name is Christian. I'm part of the marketing team at Qt. Thank you for being here and welcome to today's webinar. Today's session will be recorded so that you can go back and review it or share with a colleague who might have missed it. We do have a live Q&A with our experts at the end, so do stick around to the end for that. If you have questions as you go along, you can put it in, if you're on Zoom, put it in the toolbar. Otherwise, if you're watching on LinkedIn, which I believe we're streaming live to now, you can put it in the chat and we'll get that, one of our team members will get that put in for us to see. So with that, I think we'll round off and complete our introductions, put some faces to the names that you'll be hearing from today. So Johnny, would you like to start us off?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Christian. Hi, everyone. My name is Johnny Duval. I'm from the AWS team. I'm a senior product manager focusing on compute, edge, and networking here at AWS. Good to be here.
Great to have you, Johnny. And Alan, how about you say a few words?
Sure. Good morning, everybody. Thanks, Christian. My name is Alan Warren. I'm a principal solutions architect here at Qt, and I'll be going over a lot of the technical challenges that we deal with at Qt.
Great. And as I said, my name's Christian. I'm on the content and product marketing side of things at Qt, based out of our Copenhagen office. And I'll kind of be playing host and partial presenter today. So just to have a quick rundown of the agenda, we're going to set the scene, right? Talk about why now, why are we talking about this transition? What is the retirement of virtual waiting room in AWS? What does that mean for your organization? We have an intro to Qt, an overview of the peak traffic challenges and how virtual waiting rooms solve them. Depending on your familiarity with the solutions, we don't want to assume that you know about them, although many of you might have had first-hand experience with them as well. Then a high-level tech intro to Qt, how it works, integration, some key differentiators, and based on the feedback we've gotten from those who've considered virtual waiting room on AWS as well. Some success stories from customers, how you could get started with the transition, and then again, as I mentioned, the Q&A to take advantage of the expertise of both Johnny and Alan who've joined us today. Expect the content to take about 35 minutes, so we'll have plenty of time for questions afterwards. But as I mentioned, we were going to start by setting the scene, and to do that, I'm going to ask Johnny from AWS to put a couple words to that.
Awesome. Thanks, Christian. Yeah, so the main reason we're here today is because one of our AWS solutions will be retired next month. So in November this year, we have made the decision to deprecate and sunset one of our solutions. For those who don't know, so Virtual Waiting Room was launched back in 2022 during the COVID pandemic, as there was a big need from our customers to provide a better solution for them to handle peak traffic and for them to provide a good experience to the end users, as a lot of their end users were coming to their website to get stuff done, essentially. So it was launched at the time. As we've gone on this year, we made that decision. We've noticed that we have a lot of really great partners, including Qt, who do a really great job at this. And we've decided to support the transition to Qt going forward as we slowly ramp down the support essentially for the solution. So what does that mean to deprecate our solution? So for those who are not maybe familiar with solutions are open source products that are built by AWS, leveraging AWS services. So when we deprecate a solution, I'll go on the left side here as one of the options that you have to maintain virtual waiting room on AWS. This means that on one end, if you have already deployed the solution, what you can do is decide to maintain it yourself. You will own a lot of the ongoing updates, security patches that come with it. You will have support from your account management that doesn't change. However, there will be no updates and development that will happen from the engineering side on AWS side. All of the work in terms of scaling the solution, making sure that they're ready for big events, will all happen on your side in-house for your team. So this means, potentially higher operational burden for you to support this solution going forward if you decide to go the DIY way upfront. The second option, and maybe Christian, you can hop in here, is really the Qt fully supported path. I'll let you chime in on this one.
Yeah, and I think we'll be hitting several of these points later on as well. But I think, as Johnny kind of set up, the main distinction there being from maintaining a discontinued solution versus it is really a little bit of a choice, a different perspective to go with a managed SaaS solution, right? So then you're getting, as you can see, I'm not going to read everything on the slide here, but right, it's an ongoing, evolving product, including all security fixes and additional feature development. It's going to be supported by a team of experts as well, and as kind of relevant for those who might already be using virtual waiting room on AWS. There's quite a smooth integration and to make the transition pretty seamless, which again we'll get into in a little bit in this presentation. But I think thank you, Johnny, for giving the overview there. I think just for those of you who don't know who Qt is, we just spend 1 to 2 minutes to do a little introduction there. So basically, Qt, we have, surprising enough, a virtual waiting room. The product gives is a control mechanism from which all the other benefits flow, reliable performance on those peak days, giving users a transparent wait and a transparent experience, and giving them fair access to often limited inventory product as well. So controlling the traffic makes you, lets you control the customer experience and control costs as well. That might be a part of that. As a company, Qt's been around for over 15 years now, thousands of customers, hundreds of thousands of high traffic events, billions of visitors every year, as you can see on the screen. And I think Qt is kind of unique with the one part tech, right? Something that's been built and evolved over 15 years, which we'll get into in a bit as well, but also one part know-how, right? That comes from the years of experience of tech experts like Alan, who's joining us today, from those who've been sort of in the trenches with some of the world's biggest brands on those peak days. And that's all kind of fed back into both the product and that know-how that supports customers along the way. So just to give a little bit of an insight into where Qt operates, we primarily see organizations in these 6 verticals, but not exclusively. So we have e-commerce, ticketing is obviously a pretty big one. Government registrations, applications, things like Parks and Rec access, tax filing, telcos, oftentimes for iPhone launch, among other aspects, education for course enrollment or housing registration, and financial services for maybe unexpected spikes related to market events, payday, logins, those sorts of things. And I think if we sort of zoom in on the partnership with AWS in particular, with Johnny also alluded to a little bit earlier, the relationship and that partnership has run deep from the very start. We're a native AWS shop. Co-founders saw this cool new thing called the cloud back in 2009, 2010, and decided to build on the leader. AWS have over 10 plus core AWS services supporting Qt's virtual waiting room. We do have a dedicated connector, which we'll talk about again in a little bit in more detail, but just as I mentioned, makes for a pretty smooth and seamless transition for customers already on AWS. And several AWS sort of proof points or just descriptions of our partnership, being a qualified software vendor and winning a Partner of the Year award, and of course being on AWS Marketplace as well. So now we're just going to quickly go through some of the key problems that virtual waiting rooms solve. Again, some of you might already be intimately familiar with these, but if you're not so familiar with virtual waiting rooms, or peak traffic is not such a common thing in your day-to-day work, we'll make sure to just briefly touch on those just to get a little context before we delve into the details of how virtual waiting room like Qt solves those problems. So Alan, I'll pass the baton over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Christian. So peak traffic challenges. So ultimately, peak traffic is about scarcity. From a technical perspective, it's about managing a load on your system, the ability for your system to have the capability to handle any type of excess traffic that comes to your site. And then from a business scarcity perspective, it's how do I ensure the products get into actual hands of real customers? And then how do I fairly allocate that product when the demand far exceeds the supply? Some of the use cases that we see dealing with this are product drops and collabs. Think sneaker sales or maybe game console releases, flash sales, your Black Friday deals, your holiday deals, concerts, arts and culture, ticketing on sales, government applications, and of course, university housing applications and course enrollments are just some of the classic use cases we deal with. I do want to speak to each one of these points here for some of the common challenges that present themselves when we're managing peak traffic. You have that technical complexity. Some of those issues, as far as the technical complexity is predicting live behavior, right? What is an actual customer going to do? Load testing is important and it's effective. However, sending in simulated traffic is not going to have the same result as sending as what a group of actual people are going to do on a website. So predicting that behavior, if you're sending in sessions with load testing, you're not going to get a real world effect. So that's one of the issues that we'd have to deal with. There are always going to be bottlenecks. You have your payment gateways, your database calls that are done, tax computations, inventory management systems, all these types of systems that you may or may not have control over will usually determine whether or not a bottleneck is going to pop up. You also have scaling to deal with. Now, scaling costs can be exponential. Plus, you have to have a dedicated DevOps person whose expertise is geared towards being able to manage that prior to an event, during an event, and after an event. And it has to be done in a way where it doesn't affect your system. And you can't necessarily guarantee that that's not going to happen with scaling. The user experience, right? You have limited products that you have to deal with. Now, your site may run fine with 15,000 users on the site, but let's say you only have 600 products to available for your customers. How do you fairly allocate that without becoming a chaotic free-for-all? And to that point, you have to deal with bots, resellers, people with faster internet connections. Those people are always going to come out on top. And that doesn't encourage loyalty or lifetime value. Letting customers know what's going on. Qt, one of our main functions is communicating with customers, giving our customers the ability to let people know what's going to happen when it's going to happen during an event like that, right? You have to let them know what's left. Am I going to have a shot at getting this product, and so on. Your internal resources, right? Putting out fires for your technical team is not something tech people want to do, right? It could have a huge drain on productivity. So really, the goal then is to make this seamless so that your technical people don't have to focus on what's going wrong, and they can focus on managing the system as it should be. And then your business team can focus then on the innovation, right? They'll always demand that a tech team show up in force. And without control, there tend to be huge inefficiencies in how many people may need to be on call or be available to support those systems. And then there's the heavy lift, right? You don't want a feeling of a heavy lift. Having the tech and the know-how are always going to be valuable to that business team. Okay, let's talk about brand and reputation. Keeping customers engaged, making sure customers get a reliable chance to buy and that they have a positive brand experience, right? And then there's minimizing customer complaints, and that's making sure customers feel the process was fair. So even if they don't come away with a product, at least the experience was acceptable because you were able to communicate with them. You let them, you set the expectation so that even if they don't get that product, they're not going to run to some social media site and give you a bad review because the experience was bad. And then there's driving that loyalty with those reliable and exclusive events, right? Loyal customers are always will get the benefits that they deserve. And if that's an early exclusive access, it has to be truly exclusive, right? And that it's smooth.
Great, Alan. And now just sort of moving over to why AWS customers choose Qt. And I think maybe I'll start this one with Johnny. I know you have a lot of experience of having these discussions with customers who are considering virtual waiting room on AWS, maybe over Qt. Yeah, what have been your experiences?
Yeah, for sure. The past few years, we've had a lot of conversations with our customers as you know, as AWS. We want to stay customer obsessed and we listen to our customers and their concerns. And we make sure we provide them the best option. Some of the things that we've heard, one would be integration. The number of integrations and the seamless integrations that the Qt team has built for their product makes it really easy for a customer to have the ability to connect with their internal systems. So the integration with your website, you can take whatever platform that you have, will be smooth with the Qt team, and that's something that the AWS solution, virtual waiting room, necessarily hadn't built over time the way that Qt has. The second thing that we've heard a lot from customers is the need for comprehensive support, especially around big events. That is something that I believe Qt has real strength in. And a lot of our customers, when coming to us, were asking a lot of these questions around how do we operate it? Operating the solution, if we have a big event, if we have issues, who will be here to support? Can we have live support, et cetera, et cetera? And I believe Qt is really strong in that. And the third option, the third thing that we've heard a lot from customers and that came up over and over, and why customers have decided to choose Qt and why we believe Qt is a good option, is the customization. As Christian showed, there's a plethora of types, sizes of companies that use virtual waiting rooms that come with their particular requirements. And it's important for each of them to have the ability to customize the experience for their end users. The experience of a shoe drop is not the same as a registration for a dorm room in university. So you got to make sure that you provide that level of customization. And talking with customers, that was an important piece, and I believe Qt has real strength in this with the platform that we'll eventually be able to talk to. So these were the 3 points I would say that customers would come to us with these questions, and we believe Qt is the right option to address these needs from customers.
Awesome. Great, Johnny. Thanks for providing that context, and you had that experience firsthand, so I think it's really helpful to hear that summary from you. I think then we'll just transition now into how Qt works, sort of at a high level from a technical perspective. So now we've started by talking about setting the scene, the AWS virtual waiting room on AWS discontinuation. We talked a little bit about why it is important to focus on those peak traffic moments, how there often are challenges that something like a virtual waiting room could solve. And then Johnny just highlighted there about some of the feedback he's heard from customers about how Qt specifically can help meet those. So now let's sort of just unpack a little bit for you watching how Qt works at a high level. And we will then also zoom in on a couple elements of that customizability that Johnny mentioned that we feel from our customers as well has really stuck out. But just sort of to set the scene, high level of technical functionality, Alan, could you give a quick intro to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got these two graphics here, one the top and the bottom. Without Qt, users come into a browser, they put in a URL, they go to the site and there's no control. Whoever hits that goes to the site, right? It could be overloaded. Whereas with Qt, somebody puts your URL into a browser. They're given a 302 standard, simple 302 redirect into the Qt infrastructure. They're held there. And then when their turn comes up, they're then given another 302 back to the requested or requested page that they're trying to get to. Really simple process. So what we're providing then are multiple options for establishing protection on the site using conditional logic. Again, like I said, you can use a URL, you could use header information, anything that you can pinpoint as a place of protection you want on your site. We have conditions that you can choose that will establish that protection. And we're going to give you multiple options to do that.
Great. And I know, Al, that, concretely means you can do anything from protecting your entire website to a specific landing page to those dynamic requests like add to cart or just the payment checkout flow.
Right.
Even I think adding a specific product to the cart could trigger it. So there's really a lot of, to use Johnny's word, customization available on this particular aspect as well.
Yeah. And like I said, multiple options to do that.
Yeah. And then could you walk through, so this is like just to zoom in on, we did mention we have over 20 connectors, but we do have one for CloudFront that would, for those of you who have been working with virtual waiting room on AWS, would probably make the most sense. And just to dig in a little bit to this specific connector, Alan, could you walk us through the flow there?
Yeah, absolutely. So, so what you're seeing here, an end user comes to a website that has a Qt integration and they make a request. Our connector checks to see if that's somebody who has made it through the waiting room. If they haven't and they match a queue condition, then they're placed into the waiting room. When their turn comes up, they're given a 302 and sent back to the requested page. Once they come out of the waiting room, they're given a Qt accepted cookie that validates that user has gone through the waiting room, and it allows them to be active on the website from that point.
Great. And then could you walk us through a little bit, Johnny mentioned the quite smooth integration aspect. It's one of the key differentiators, Alan. Could you talk a little bit to how that works either with CloudFront or elsewhere in the tech stack?
Yeah. So as you can see here, we have over 20 connectors. So depending on your tech stack, we more than likely have a connector that's going to work for you. There is a one-time integration with your account with no DNS changes. Usually, we can spend an hour with a customer and have a hello world up full integration in a day. The CloudFront integration is extremely easy. And again, AWS is one of our close partners, so that helps along with the support from both sides, from AWS as well as Qt. And then there's the really great thing is that there's no sensitive data that goes through Qt. So you stay GDPR and CCPA compliant. But as you can see here on the right there, that there are tons of connectors depending on your tech stack there.
Yep, and that's also I realized I forgot to write native app there as well, but we do, you do have the Android and iOS logos there as well. So native app, edge, server side, client side, progressive web applications, all able to be covered. Great, thanks, Alan. So I will just do sort of a highlight reel of the key Qt capabilities. Again, this is from that feedback, from the customer feedback, and there's 4 main areas. Now we just talked about integration, which Johnny also spotlighted, and he talked about the support, which I'll get into in a moment. And then in terms of the customizability or sort of the strength of the functionality, there's sort of 3 areas that really stick out. So the one is traffic control and monitoring. So really, again, these are high sweat, high stakes moments. Our customers really talk about getting peace of mind with the full control and observability that's available within Qt. A fair user experience, so ensuring users have fair access to limited products. Again, we talked about it's often scarcity involved in these peak days. And then a transparent user experience, keeping them, and this is something Alan alluded to in the challenges, right? Keeping customers informed of where they are, how the sale is progressing. And lastly, we'll hit on, we already hit on integration. We'll hit on expert support a bit as well as sort of a, let's say, capability of the tech and know-how. But just to jump in, again, some examples of monitoring key metrics in real time. There's a shareable monitor page. This is sort of known as the central command during high demand. I like to think this is what everyone will have on their screen during the peak days. It's minute by minute. How many customers are arriving to the waiting room, how many people are in the waiting room, what the average wait is, how many are flowing out to the site. It's able to be adjusted on the fly depending on how your systems are performing, right? So you can start a little more conservatively, make sure all your downstream systems are not overheating, and then you can slowly adjust the speed up, for example, if you'd like to. That happens instantaneously. Pausing and restarting the waiting room, so you can pause if you do run into any challenges. It's the oh crap button. We've sometimes heard it called. And again, you just keep all the visitors there, right? So nothing happens. They still maintain their place in line, but allows you to go in and fix it. And getting some observability, some proactive alerts into unusual traffic patterns, might it be from bots, or if there's any troubleshooting needed into how the queue is functioning. And I know you're kind of in the trenches with a lot of customers on these high peak days, and are often looking at this monitor. Any extra comments you'd like to add here?
Yeah, I think one of the features that are present here on this particular screen, and I did speak about it earlier, is your ability to communicate with customers. We do have a dynamic messaging feature right there from that control panel that allows you to actually communicate with your customers who are actively in the waiting room.
Yeah, that's a great example, and that actually is a nice segue into the sort of the user experience, the transparent user experience here. So there is that real-time communication pane that Alan mentioned. There's also really critical stuff, just basic things like wait, where you are in line, where your average wait is, so you can kind of plan your time a little bit. I think everyone's had the experience where they've called a number and just been put on a dial to get a busy dial tone, or get connected but just have endless hold music, or get connected and be told you're number 10 in line, estimated wait is 5 minutes, press 1 to get a call back. Very similar situation here. And I think if you think about that phone example, you'll realize your anxiety and stress level decreases with each of those scenarios. The same thing here, the callback option in our case being an email notification. We already talked about the real-time communication and the wait information. And then also all of this is skinned and branded in a way so that it feels like a really seamless transition from a user experience perspective, that they feel like they haven't left your site or left your brand, that they know they're just another part of your website and a part of that user journey. Third, we talked about fair access, right? I mean, Alan spoke a little bit to the limited inventory, right? 600 sneakers and you got 15,000 people who want them. How do you handle that? The Qubit's got several fairness mechanisms, right? Again, it all stems from the control. You have this gating or control, throttling, whatever word you want to use for it. That's what the virtual waiting room is allowing. And the fair access is one of the benefits that flows from that. So you can do it in a first in, first out way. That's often quite commonly used if we have Qubit running constantly in sort of a 24/7 safety net behind the scenes for those sudden unexpected peaks, and to allow you to optimize your cloud setup as well. For those drops, what we often recommend is sort of a randomization or a live raffle. Everyone will show up, let's say an hour before the ticket on sale or the sneaker drops. At the start time, everyone's randomized, like you just saw in this graphic here. Make sure everyone has a fair shot at being number 1 in line. And anyone who arrives after is added to the back of the line in a first in, first out way. And lastly, Alan did also mention a bit is one of the challenges to making sure you're rewarding loyal customers. And again, because Qubit is that control mechanism, there's a gating mechanism there. You can give invite-only access to ensure earlier exclusive access to VIP customers or membership benefits, while also making sure that the website is functioning once those loyal customers get to the website. And lastly, again, sort of not concrete functionality, but part of that larger tech and know-how combination, is sort of expert support on those high stakes days. And I will let Alan speak a little bit to this. I know it's maybe a little awkward to toot your own horn, Alan, but I will highlight the numbers at the bottom so they can kind of speak for themselves on that front. But maybe you could just walk through a little bit, sort of some, not the day-to-day, but sort of some of the key services and support that you're offering to give that peace of mind on those peak days.
Yeah, sure. We're always willing and available to help with implementation services, just so that we can ensure your integration is configured based on industry best practices that we've learned over the past 15 plus years. We do provide 24/7, 365 global technical support. And then, of course, during your first event, not only are we expecting to be on that call with customers, but I tend to love to have sessions prior to that to just to make our customers comfortable with the Qt product, make sure they know, how to create the events, what controls to put in place, what the expectations could be coming in. Just again, just based off of what we've been doing over the past 15 years and the best practices that we've identified over those years.
Awesome. And I know what we have a nice or have a little graphic towards the end as well, just in the migration part that speaks a little bit to some all those steps leading up to just the very first event that Alan will speak to as well. But now we talked about sort of how Qt works at a high level technically, the many options for integration that make it quite flexible to fit into your tech stack, quite smooth, quick to set up. These 4 key points: the control and monitoring, the fair access, the transparent user experience, and the expert support. And sort of, I think it's worth zooming out just a little bit and saying, what are the benefits, the business benefits that flow from having peak traffic become a solved problem, right? And I kind of think there's a nice quote from a customer who said something to the effect of, high traffic event usually means you've got a lot of things on your plate to worry about. And, this customer talked about allowing yourself to focus on the quality and content of what you're offering without a concern for how the traffic spikes might and increased servers load might tarnish a user experience that you've put so much focus on, right? So let this put this in a box. It's a solved problem. You have that control mechanism, and these are the sort of benefits that can flow from that. So just a little bit graphic here at the bottom, we're talking about levels of traffic control. This is sophistication of the virtual waiting room or control mechanism, and then the benefits that can flow from that. And we have a series of stats here. These are from our customers, 214 responses in 2023 and 2024. There's a simple sort of virtual waiting room protecting that infrastructure. You can see here that customers talking about improving the online experience, right? You're not having crashes or slowdowns or overselling, and site performance improves as well. That next level up is implementing the best practices, ensuring multiple dynamic ways of giving fair access and transparent user experiences, right? Not all virtual waiting rooms might do that. 85% of customers, for example, using Qt, saying that their sales are fairer with Qt in place, relevant when there's scarcity involved. Advanced virtual waiting rooms gives really granular traffic management, enable visitor segmentation to give early exclusive access, maybe bring in some bot mitigation. So we talk about half of customers increased their insight into genuine and malicious traffic. And that is to say, not all Qt customers have bot problems, right? So it's not relevant to all of them necessarily. But now we talked about those are the elements of the product, what benefits flow from that. So first, you think about optimized systems and processes. You're able to streamline your sales, reduce how many staff are needed on call. Problem Alan spoke to a little bit earlier, right? The business making sure that the tech folks are there in force, in mass, just to make sure nothing is going wrong. Well, when you have that control mechanism, that's not necessary. So we see an average roughly half reduction in how many staff's on call. And of course, things like database scaling or server scaling, you can also reduce those costs. Then you're able to, again, reclaim that time, trust on your sales process. You know that's going to work. You don't have to worry about it. You can focus on innovating your offerings, having your dev teams really focusing on the business driving features, for example, instead of, again, putting out fires like Alan spoke to a little bit, and really strengthening the brand and relationship with customers. And then, of course, overall having a thriving business, right? So making sure that you're selling through product efficiently. 85% say that Qt helped that. Yeah, you might have a slightly slower sale in some cases, but slow is smooth and smooth is fast, as they say. Believe in the military, right? So overall, you're by minimizing the site performance issues, by ensuring fair access, you're able to sell through more efficiently. And in many cases, it's not just maintaining your revenue, it's that actually increases revenue. And we see a couple of examples of that here. If I just sort of now make it a little more concrete with 3 cases across industries. For example, Sky Mobile for their iPhone launch saw a 37% conversion rate increase that led to a significant 7-figure increase in sales during their iPhone launch. Talked a little bit about server scaling and savings on that. Simplo is a very large, I think #1 or #2 ticketer in Brazil, had 50% savings on server scaling. Again, that really adds up when they're running 200, 300 events a year, on sales a year. And then this is from the government of Catalonia in Spain on the right. They, I think, now are protecting 12 different services from tax filing to university registration, and again, ensuring that their citizens are getting that equitable, reliable, fair access to those digital public services that they offer. So again, I think it's just sometimes helpful. We talk about capabilities, and that's really great, but then tying it to what does this mean in the bigger business context? So hopefully both these 3 concrete examples and sort of walking through that little pyramid or iceberg, whatever you want to call it, can help show a little bit that connection there. Now, lastly, before we get to the Q&A, Alan, I promised we would do a quick run through of like what this migration might look like, or not, I'm not gonna say migration, what a transition might look like for, let's say I'm a customer, I'm already on virtual waiting room on AWS, I'm thinking about moving to Qt. What steps would be involved in that sort of onboarding and getting started?
Yeah, so we're going to be with you from conception through your first event. We're going to provide support for you, and it all starts with talking with our business people. And then we set up your account. We will walk them through the integration. We'll help them customize, whether it's the waiting room or it's the number of people that they want to send in and manage. And then we're going to make sure we explain how to create the waiting rooms, and then what best practices to apply to those waiting rooms, and then how they will set the expectations for their customers going forward. And again, that is going to be all the way through to the first event for a customer.
Awesome. So right before we start the Q&A, that's all the content we have for today. Again, please do add questions in the Q&A toolbar if you're on Zoom, or in the chat if you're on LinkedIn. Just wanted to have a quick moment before we do that for a poll. If you have sort of been intrigued by what you saw today and would you like a little more information, you can choose to select here if you'd like a demo, if you'd like some technical documentation sent, or if you're good for now. And this is always a little bit helpful to understand. If you do have a desire to talk a little bit more concretely, of course, a webinar, we're talking broad brush, but Alan and his team will dive into the specifics of your case if you think that that's something that could be interesting. All right, and then we'll wrap up the poll here, and we'll open up for question and answer. So let me just see here, look at the questions. Let's see. So this one, I think we've got one in that I think for Alan might be relevant for you. How long does a typical migration take from virtual waiting room on AWS to Qt?
Yeah, usually about an hour. If we spend an hour with an AWS developer, we can get them fully integrated. Again, we have a really strong partnership with AWS. So not only AWS, but any of the other edge connectors or any of the connectors that we have. If we can spend an hour or so with a developer, we can get you fully integrated. And that's a one-time integration. You don't ever have to do it again once the code's in.
Okay, that's helpful. Johnny, I think this one would make most sense for you. And I guess you might have already spoken to this a little bit, but it could be worth just reiterating. Can you share what led AWS to choose Qt as a recommended partner for customers who are looking to move off of the virtual waiting room on AWS now that it's being sunsetted?
Yes, definitely. And I did touch a bit on it. I can touch on some of those points. I think there's mostly three things that we've heard quite a bit of customers ask us about that made that decision very clear to us. Integration partners, as Alan has talked about, I think that's a big piece. Um, just the tool itself, the granular controls that you're able to get with the tool. Customers like that level of control, and based on what their needs are, they're able to kind of address their own requirements. And the support, of course, top tier support from Qt. Something that I'll add as well is the type of folks that have been using our solution have mostly been technical. So our solution is open source. It's a CloudFormation template that you need to deploy, and you need to work in the console to do these customizations. Not everyone is comfortable at times working in a console. It's mostly a technical endeavor. So with Qt having the level of support on the technical side, but going up the stack all the way to allowing you as a SaaS product to operate the solution, I think that made it easy for us to say, hey, if potentially you don't have that technical resources available, then Qt is a good option. If, for example, you're mostly on the marketing team and you wanna run something like this. So these were the main points here.
Right, and that actually now just prompted me. I realized I didn't mention it earlier, but so there is that sort of the web-based admin platform that's relatively easy to use, pretty straightforward for setting up the waiting rooms. Again, the integration is a one and done, and then you configure all the waiting rooms in that web-based admin platform. But if you do prefer to not be in a web-based admin platform and you want to do it versus API, for example, we have lots of customers who use our REST-based APIs to do everything, manage the whole life cycle of waiting rooms. You can pull statistics from it. You can start and stop the waiting room. You can adjust the flow rate of traffic through. All of that can be done via API. So there's quite a lot of, Johnny mentioned customizability, so flexibility earlier. And I think that's another element I just realized we hadn't mentioned it earlier. Where that's the case. And again, last call for questions in here. I think we have one more that I'm seeing. Alan, I think this is let's say a bigger picture question, but best for you. From your experience, what do teams underestimate most about handling high demand events?
Yeah, I've worked a lot of high demand events, and I think um, a lot of teams underestimate the amount of bot and reseller activity that there's going to be. And then the extra load that brings along with the negative effects it can have on a brand. Um, yeah, people tend to not think about that, right? It's really just about getting the product out there. But if you're trying to be fair, it becomes about getting it into actual customer hands. And that bot activity and that reseller activity can be such a detriment to a customer's brand.
That's a great point. Now I'm actually just thinking to some recent statistics we got from a new type of waiting room we have that's specifically tailored to these sort of high demand, low inventory events. And I think we've seen consistently 95 to 98% of traffic being identified as bots.
Yep.
Really just next level. And with Qt as that gating mechanism, able to keep that load off your site, block it, and really just focus the performance and everything on your genuine customers, of course, in addition to making sure that they're getting their hands on the product. And we saw one customer actually use that product, but sort of in a view-only mode. They were doing some initial validation of it. So they just detected, but they didn't take that mitigation action. What they ended up seeing, I don't remember the exact percentages, but I think it was something like 70% of traffic was from malicious users, but only 5% of purchases actually came from that bot traffic. So sometimes they're really just throwing a wrench into the sale, hoarding product so that real customers can't get it. They want to sell it on a secondary marketplace.
Yep.
It can be really nasty stuff, and it's a cat and mouse game. They're getting really aggressive with it. So that's an interesting, luckily not everyone deals with those situations, but the ones who do really, it's a tough fight. And so that's an interesting observation you had on that, Alan. So let me just double check that I'm not missing any other questions from the audience, but I think we are all set. So just to wrap things up, again, virtual waiting room on AWS is being sunset next month, November 2025. Qt is here as a option for transition, a close AWS partner to manage SaaS solutions. So you get a lot of that expert support, the tech plus the know-how, of course, an ongoing, evolving, innovating product, feature rich as well. And if you'd like information on that, there's a link here to our website. You're happy to discuss us. We're also on the AWS marketplace, which makes it pretty easy from a procurement perspective. But to wrap up, I want to say thank you so much, Alan and Johnny, for joining and sharing your insights and your expertise with us today on this topic.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thanks for having me, Christian.
Great. Thanks everyone for joining, and have a fantastic day wherever you are in the world.